It's Mark and Pete.
Welcome to this week's show. The colourful conversation is the perils of long-term financial investments. Now, this is an emotive subject and one which covers a wide range of investment topics. So, for example, we will talk about pensions, we will talk about funds, we will also talk about how governments are involved in long-term investments and short-term investments. So just to set the scene, we'll start with pensions. Pensions first began in the United Kingdom in 1908 when the people received small offerings from government, which was 25 pence per week, or at least that would be the equivalent for today. And that was set up by David Lloyd George's government and administered by the post office. Now, at the time, only 500,000 people were eligible to receive a pension today, at that point. Well, of course, as we know, moving on, it seemed as though that the state pension is something that we're all entitled to. But are we? Because, as we know, the state pension alone will never be enough to be able to actually sustain ourselves in today's market. So with me today is Pete. So Pete, what's your view on how people should plan for their future, short and long term?
Yes, well, I'm always here. I'm always here for you. You know that, Mark.
Of course.
I think,
especially in my old age.
Yeah. Well, planning for the future and planning for your retirement or whatever you're investing for the future is a risky business. And I think that's really the key to what we're going to be talking about today. The fact that however you plan for the future, in trying to lay down a plan in which you're going to have an income in the future, you're going to have to take a risk. And the reason you're going to have to take a risk is it's through the risk that you get the added value. That's why you get extra money back from it. So in planning for the future, if you're going to be investing large amounts, you're going to be making a large risk. Or rather, sorry, you're going to be taking a large risk. Now, you were talking about the pensions there, which started in 1908, which I didn't know before we were doing the research for this show that it was quite that long ago. But it's interesting that at that time they were talking about a relatively few number of people. It was non-contributory, so you weren't investing. It was the government paying for people in their old age to look after them, I suppose, sort of a replacement for the workhouse. And that's more of the idea of just compassionate payment, a compassionate grant, I suppose, to older people, rather than what we're talking about, which is investing for the future, which is a slightly different way of doing it. And in talking about investing for the future, what you're doing is instead of having the state being necessarily the paternalistic figure doling out things for your future, you are making plans to have a sustainable pattern of living in the future. So you're investing. The onus is down to you. It can be the state doing it on your behalf, but again, it's investing for you. It then becomes investment, which it wasn't to start with, as I was saying. It's just the government giving handouts. So you've got a very different situation. To illustrate what I mean, when you're talking about pensions now, you pay in your national insurance contributions and eventually you get a pension. Now, I know those contributions aren't actually stored up and then they pay them out, but there is sort of the idea that I've paid my dues, so then when I get to a certain age, I'm going to get that amount because I've been paying in. So even though technically that's not true, that's how it feels to us all involved in the process. So I think planning for the future is a risky business. I also think it has changed significantly over the past few years. So what we're talking about is a different landscape today.
Well, of course, what we also need to identify is that we can classify investments in sort of three key areas. So there's the state pension, of course, as you've talked about. There's individual investments. And, of course, there's occupational pensions and investments. I just wanted to read out a statistic which actually really talked about another aspect, which is this individual planning. Because according to Legal and General, The average pension pot is £25,000. Now, on the surface, that might be a lot of money, but what they were saying is that in actual fact, some of them are worth less than £10,000. So they gave a simple scenario. So, for example, many people don't actually realise that, for example, how low an annuity rate might be today. So imagine if you were a 65-year-old man who was about to retire and
I'm imagining it.
I can imagine it. But let's say you had £50,000 in a pension pot. But if you bought an annuity today, that probably would only equate to around £3,300 a year. Now, that's not a lot of money in today's society.
No, that's not enough to live on, no.
Especially even if you added up and included the state pension, probably that would take you to an annual fee of around £8,000, which in itself seems like a lot of money. But when you think about all the cost of living, that is not a lot of money.
No. I mean, you're not talking about an income that you're going to be able to live on. At least, I guess you could just about eke a living on that, as long as you owned your own house, if you're in that sort of position. But actually, coming to the position of owning your own house is actually some more investing for the future. If you've been paying off a mortgage, or if you, unusually, I guess these days, saved up and then bought a house, you were investing for the future in buying the house. So that's sort of another contribution to the pension that you've had to make. If you didn't own your own property and had to pay out rent, or were starting to buy, so paying out mortgage contributions, as well as all your everyday living requirements, 8,000, not going to really hit the spot, is it? It's not going. No. You're not going to live on that.
No, you're not going to live on that, and you'd certainly struggle for sure. But I think the other thing is that even if you look at contribution pension schemes, your company may provide a fee, and you might, as an employee, decide to spend anything between 8, 10, up to 15% of your income. And if companies are willing to obviously match that, there is no guarantee to what that final fund will be in, say, 30 years' time from when you start your career in your late teens, early 20s.
Yeah. No, there's no guarantee. And it's interesting you should say about the idea of guarantee, because of course what I think this was more common than it is now. In certain institutions, like for example the Bank of England, you're likely to get a pension from your employer, whereby it's guaranteed that the income you'll get as a pension will be at your your pension itself, not the income. Your pension itself will be based on your final salary. Yes. Now that's not that common in private companies, but in state organisations that's more common. And in the Bank of England, who you could say contributed to the financial crisis themselves quite heavily, they have looked after their own. So I know this is sort of contention that it does seem like that they have sort of a wonderful pension scheme where their pension level is based on their final year of earnings. Now, that means what they're doing is they're fixing a level for your pension.
Yes.
But, of course, their investments may not provide that amount of income, so they're taking on the risk themselves.
Exactly.
Taking on the risk on your behalf. But yeah, for most people, there isn't that level of security. You cannot be sure that you're going to actually reach the level. In fact, if you look at the whole idea of pensions investing over such a long time, perhaps it just isn't a good way of going about it at all.
Well, I think that we'll talk about other forms of investment, but it's interesting about the philosophy of the way that people go about planning for their future, because we've identified that there are different ways of doing it. But strangely, investors confuse volatility, particularly in today's market, with risk. So, for example, real risk is not delivering a promise. So when banks or pension schemes or any other financial form of investment actually give a promise to the investor. If that promise is not fulfilled, or at least if there are issues, and we've seen where banks like Lehman Brothers and even further back in time with Barings Bank, when there are unregulated particularly well, I know they're trying to do better, but Northern Rock, for example, who have suffered in recent times, and governments have to step in. Clearly there was a promise at the outset that they would trust their managers, their fund managers. They would be trusting in the way that they would manage your money as an investor. And of course, things have gone awry. Without any doubt, this then makes people particularly scathing and sceptical about financial institutes as to what is a worthwhile investment, short-term or long-term.
Yes. So, I wonder whether there's any sort of wisdom to be gained from the literary world on this. I wonder if there's a poem about this.
It's very funny you should mention that, because I've sort of put some thoughts together on this. And,
really?
And strangely enough, I sort of have a take on this, which I think sort of reflects certainly my view of the financial world.
Well, gentle listener, just prepare yourself, sit back, and remember, as I always say, it could be good. It could be a good poem. You never know. So, give him a chance.
This is a poem which is entitled Asleep at a Wake. A little bird told me one day to invest a pile of money. It tweeted all day in a social way. Your fortunes look bright and sunny. Save, save, before you go to your grave, and a fine nest egg for you I will build. Spend, spend, watch your wealth transcend, and we will both be thankful and thrilled. So the intrepid bird went out for a fun-filled flutter. The years flew by, and I waved him on high, earning the bread and butter. Cheap, cheap are my paltry fees, heareth my words so worldly wise. Reap, reap from the seeds that I sow, look forward to the long-term prize. The hunched bird soon grew bigger, and so too its bill. Each charge did inflate at a terrible rate, then it plunged from a fine fiscal kill. Calamity! Calamity! The committee cried. The funds need more time to settle. But the piggy bank's carcass rotted away, and the whistleblower sang like a kettle. As a final account in the wake of mismanagement culture, the equity has vanished, the business banished, so beware of the financial vulture. Take note. A group of vultures is called a committee. In flight, a flock of vultures is a kettle, and when the birds are feeding together at a carcass, the group is called a wake. So there you go. A skeptical view, maybe.
Yeah. No, it was quite good. Not too bad. Don't give up the day job, but I think it was good. Yeah, it's an interesting take on it. I mean, I just mentioned for our listener at home now, who, I say at home, but of course this is a downloadable podcast, so they could be listening on their generic MP3 player climbing up the north face of the Eiger. But wherever they are, gentle listener, I'd like to just point out that when you've had a listen to the podcast or on the internet radio and you think, I'd like to take a close look at those poems, you can take a look by going to markandpete.com, where the text is available online, and you can read through those poems at your leisure, and let us know what you think at Mark and Pete on Twitter. In fact, let us know what you think about any of the issues that we raise on that point. And just one other housekeeping issue for the podcast here, I just wanted to say, because we've been talking a little bit about investment so far in the show, and a lot of what we've been talking about is effectively being when you're investing, you're taking a risk, and you're involving loaning your money to someone effectively, and then you get more money back. And that's a little bit like usury as defined in the Bible. And if you want to hear a little bit more about whether that's acceptable today, whether investing money expecting more in return, even if you're not actually doing anything practical with it. So that's sort of take the Bible's take on that. Then tune into the Good News Show. It's the Good News Show. If you want to follow, that's another show that I do regularly, and the podcast is available on Spreaker. You can follow for that show at TGNS UK, the Good News Show. Sorry, the Good News Show in Britain. So it's at TGNS UK. Anyway, back to the topic for today. We're talking about planning for the future, investing for the future, and the problems in deciding what you want many years in the future and planning for that and expecting maybe the markets to be on your side.
Well, I think the one challenge here is that we've identified is becoming more complex. That if you consider what you need to do, both in terms of the short term, being able to pay your bills, pay your way, for your home, but at the same time plan for your future. It is actually more complex than it perhaps was, 40, 50 years ago, when at one point people could actually afford to live off the pension. So I think that what we really need to establish is that what our take is what would be the best way to plan for today and tomorrow.
Mm. Yes, I mean, what we're saying really is that at Mark and Pete we're very much in favour and banging on about the importance of long-termism, of long-term planning, and yet when you're planning for your future by taking out a pension, by investing, financial investments. By doing that, you're not actually planning. You're giving up your planning to other people, if you like. You're handing over your money and allowing the planning to be done by someone else on what happens to it. So, in what way are you planning? Planning involves sort of steps to go through. So, if you're talking about handing your money over to an investment company and them investing it for you, and knowing that you could lose the money, are you really making a safe plan for the future? Or is that actually rather short term? Because Correct. What you're thinking is the short term emotionally, in that what you're doing is you're saying, well, look, I've taken away the worry by making this regular payment. But maybe you should still be worried. I'm afraid that's what we're saying.
In my view, I think that what you've got to do is the classic principle of don't put all your eggs in one basket. I think that what you've got to do is almost look at it like a portfolio. You have to take ownership. No matter what you do, whether you like investments, whether you're interested in it or not, you have to take responsibility. And it comes down to there will be an element of investment in pensions. There will be an element of investing in property, possibly equity schemes, whether they're cash-based or share-based. But the point here is that you cannot just rely on someone else, i.e. purely a pension company or even your own employer, to look after you, because that is not going to happen. Because we've seen too often, either in a badly regulated financial world where there is still issues to be addressed and things can go awry, particularly at the point of maturity, where, as we've seen in recent times, people have spent 30 to 40 years putting their money into a scheme, and then at the last minute they realise that the scheme has fallen foul of bad practice and they don't have enough money to look after themselves in their dotage. So it really is important in today's society. Here we are in the 21st century. You have to sort of install this principle of taking ownership and thinking both short, medium and long term.
Yes, planning.
It's an integrated process.
Yes, planning for your entire future. You need enough money to live on now. You need enough money to pay for your kids' education. You need for the medium-term future, and you need enough money to care for yourself when you're retired. So you need all those levels, and you need to plan. Now, you may well need help in planning. So you're not saying you're going to be left on your own, but actually it's your future, and you need to take responsibility for it. And don't let the state take it from you. Take that away from you and say, there, we'll look after you. Because we're now seeing how that sort of, I guess, really a sense of entitlement from people that's been grown in them by the way that the state has been running things. People expect the state to look after them from cradle to grave. And we're seeing that that's been unsustainable.
Yes,
And
and I also think that with that in mind, I do believe to help people there needs to be better regulation. So whilst I agree that you can't rely on the government, I do believe the government is responsible for managing regulation a lot better.
yes, and could I just, I mean, we're talking about pension planning for the future. So what we're pointing out therefore is, you'll need money at all stages of your life. You're not just planning for that long-term time when you're 65 or 70 or older. Think about times before that when it would be good if you invested wisely, if you had an injection of available cash. But just thinking about whether you hand over responsibility to the state, we've said that's not a good idea. But the state and others, financial institutions, can offer advice and can offer education. And I would say, just speaking from my own point of view, when going back to a school life, I didn't receive that much education in financial planning. A little bit, in fact, somewhere in this house, I still have a little book I was given on managing money that I was given at the time. It was handed to me when we left school. I say we because Mark and I were at the same school. We were handed this book. Have you still got that book on how to look after your money? I bet you haven't. I bet you've lost it, haven't you? That's why things have gone wrong for you. Anyway, that was it. I think
I gave it away to some financial manager. A little bird told me one day that he had a plan.
But my point being was that was as far as I remember, it was really the extent of the advice that I've been given. Simply handed a book. The level of education on how to manage your money is very low, and yet we were taught all sorts of things about history and about obscure scientific subjects that just haven't come in useful in my life.
No.
Knowing the triple point of water hasn't helped me in my life that much, but knowing how about stocks and shares, knowing about investment tools and products would have been rather helpful.
Well, it's interesting because I do remember the school curriculum. I actually chose commerce, so I did actually have a bit more insight in terms of what the financial world was doing. But I do agree that I don't think that when people either leave school or college or university, or ironically, even when they get into the commercial world and start working for companies, that they're not really equipped to plan very effectively. And I think that's partly for the fact that it's, well, whose responsibility is it? Well, I think quite simply, it's yours. You have to take ownership. You cannot rely on a third party alone. And unfortunately, that just means that, as you're growing up, you have to be your own fund manager to be able to make your financial planning work more effectively short, medium and long term.
I mean, and let's just talk about just specifically pensions just a bit. In that we at the start of the show, you were saying about when pensions were introduced and that they were payable if you were 70 or older, and the pension age went down to 65. Well, and now for most people it's 67.
Yes,
but really at 67. Majority of people, certainly many people, are perfectly capable of working and earning an income. 70 seems a more reasonable age to me. Should be put up because if you're going to keep this particular pension system that we have, which we have doubts about whether it's sustainable, this current way of providing a pension, you're putting too much pressure on the current taxpayers to pay for the pension of people.
That's correct.
Because that's the system. And, by making the pension, the age at which pension is payable, too young, you're having too many people that you have to pay out to, and therefore it becomes unsustainable. And it's going to go, the whole system is going to implode. And it's that serious in that if you look at some countries. Sorry, yeah. Let's move on, yeah.
Well, there is another reason, and the main reason is we have this very worrying trend, which is about the lost generation, because those people who are perhaps in their late teens, early 20s have struggled to get jobs. So effectively, they're not contributing to the system. And so there's a gap. And what that means is that people, well, we're talking probably about over 1 million teenagers to people in their early 20s who have still not got a job, who have qualified from their chosen professions, gained a degree or a particular qualification in a chosen industry, and still are yet to be able to break into their industry, earn money, as well as contribute to the coffers of the country to be able to sustain people who are about to mature going into pension.
So what do you say? Are you saying that it's the education system, the sort of expectation that you go away to university or you have some sort of further and higher education when it's not needed, when you should be learning on the job, maybe in an apprenticeship scheme, and contributing to society in that way, rather than just being in an educational institution? Well, I mean, that's part of the problem, isn't it?
Well, I think it's twofold. On the one hand, I do believe that you need to get an education, and if you go to university and you're academically able, you should pursue that course. The problem is that even if you are outstanding in a chosen skill or subject matter, unfortunately, there aren't enough jobs to sustain people, and statistically, the government has recognised that. But on the other hand, I also do agree that certainly commerce should take more responsibility to be able to nurture people into better, more integrated and more comprehensive training schemes to get people into work quicker, to learn, to give them the opportunity to build up experience and transition to those veterans who will be retiring over the next 5 to 10 years. And effectively that knowledge that will go out of the door has to be replaced. And unfortunately, we have this lost generation that is actually now going to face some problems, because that generation, how do they plan for their long-term future? They don't have the money. They're saddled with debts from either education or society. So they're having to fill a very, very big gap. And that means that certainly people who are in their 40s, 50s and even 60s today may have planned sufficiently, but there are those people who are in their 20s and 30s who probably will struggle even more because sadly there is not enough planning in place to sustain them when they go into their 70s.
Yeah, well, I guess we're drawing to a close now in today's show, but we've hinted during the show at possible solutions to the problems. But mainly we've been talking about the problem and showing that there is a big problem. But we do believe, both Mark and I believe, that there are solutions. There are ways to manage this. There are ways to change the way things are run such that there isn't this issue where people fall by the wayside because they haven't had the correct planning or information or education to be able to cope with planning for the future. We believe that there are solutions, but I think that's a discussion for another show at Mark and Pete.
So, as Peter's said earlier, we want to know your opinion. So, tweet us and let us know your views on this subject matter. So, join us again next time for more colourful conversations with Mark and Pete.